Hello and welcome to the MindCep Podcast, helping you maximize your performance. And this is your host, Alex Muir. And in today's episode of our special guest series, we're going to be speaking with Damon Burton. Damon is the president of SEO National, and he is a digital marketing expert on all things SEO. So please welcome Damon Burton to the podcast. And this episode is brought to you by RadioGuestList.com, the #1 free radio guest, podcast, and talk show guest expert interview booking service on the internet. Damon, welcome to the podcast. How's it going?
What's up, Alex? Good, yeah.
Good. Yeah, really appreciate you joining us today. I know you're a really busy guy and probably lots going on as well. I've heard from lots of people, although we're in a pandemic right now, some people are also as busy as ever because the business doesn't stop, right? So
I would be one of those fortunate ones, yeah.
yeah. Well, that's really good. And just kind of give the audience an idea about your little background there. Why don't you let us know kind of what you do and what's trending for you right now, current projects.
Yeah, so my background, Damon Burton, I started a company called SEO National 13 years ago. And maybe after I give you my background, another point of topic we might be able to talk about is how I started this like right before a recession. And that's kind of relevant now. But yeah, so SEO is my thing. Search engine optimization. If you don't know what that is, it's trying to get your website to show up higher on Google without paying for ads. And so the idea is the more visibility, the more traffic, the more leads, the more sales. So that's been my world for like 13 years. I very early on decided I would be a master of one. And so I have a lot of other skill sets, but I said, I'm going to run an SEO company and not a company that does a bazillion other things and then kind of sucks at all of it. So just stick to that. And as far as projects, all over the place. I just finished the book, and as of recording, I get my first stack of 150 copies today.
Wow.
So I'm eagerly checking the door every 5 minutes.
That's awesome.
Did that, and worked with some really cool people in the last year or two. Worked with Team Store at the Utah Jazz, the NBA team, and working on increasing sales of their merchandise. We got a new Inc. 5000 client that we're working with an international company in Dubai. And so those are like the highlight reels that usually people think are cool, but there's all the other kind of typical day-to-day stuff in between. But I think that's probably what's more applicable to the question.
For sure. And now, is this another new book that's or is this the Outrank book?
This is the Outrank book, yeah. So,
okay, yeah.
I've been working on it for probably 2 years, and writing a book is a whole other story. But the abbreviated explanation is, how do you take tons of years of experience and then just like puke it on a book? And so it was an interesting experience. I kind of went in phases. Phase 1 was just throw all the ideas out there of things I want to touch on. And then phase 2 is organize it in some sort of order. And then phase 3 is write it. And then phase 4 was what took the longest. And as I've talked to other authors, they agree. And that's editing, because you read it and then you go, oh, I got to move this chapter. And then because you moved a whole chapter, you're like, well, now I need to read it again and make sure it still makes sense. So you read it again, and then you move a paragraph, and then you move a word, and like, it's just never ending.
Yeah, it's definitely quite the process. And I like how you said you got to break it down in phases, because that's, writing really improves your thinking, because you really got to organize your thoughts, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. But I'm really excited to have you on today. And I got lots of questions for you. And one of my biggest questions for you that I noticed I want to bring up was how do you show up higher on Google and without paying for ads? Because I know a lot of people, they pump all their marketing budget into ads for SEO because that's what they think they need to do. But maybe they need to focus more on, how to improve their SEO without having to spend that extra capital, right?
Yeah, why don't we start with a little bit of explanation. So SEO, we talked about what it is. You show up higher without paying for ads, and then there's paid ads. And so sometimes for listeners, they might hear different terminology. They might hear SEO versus SEM versus PPC. And so SEM kind of covers both. SEM is search engine marketing, and then underneath that umbrella, you have SEO, which is the organic non-paid placement. Then you have PPC, which is pay per click, which is paid ads. So I've just focused on SEO the entirety of my career. And, I do pay per click, but like I said, I don't want to be the guy that just does a lot of things averagely. And so I just focus on SEO. And, as far as how you do it, there's a lot of other marketers out there. I don't know if it's because they truly believe it or they just want to be polarizing, but a lot of other marketers say SEO is the only way, or PPC is the only way, or social media is the only way. And I think that's really flawed ideology, because what happens is, if they're all paying for themselves and driving return, why not do them all? And so you can layer your marketing results, and the effectiveness of each of those is going to depend on your industry. And, when I talk to a lot of people, I say, okay, well, largely it depends on your cash flow and what your profit margins are, because if you sell a widget for $1.99, then SEO probably doesn't make sense, because if I charge you $2,000 a month, you're gonna have to sell a crap ton of widgets to even break even. So, sometimes it makes sense, sometimes it doesn't. And, maybe one of the last clarifications I'll give before I actually explain the basics of SEO is all these different types of marketing have their advantages and disadvantages. So the only disadvantage to SEO is it's a little bit of a slower play. And when I talk about it, I'll explain why. But other than that, it's awesome, because it's the exact opposite pros and cons of paid ads. So the advantage of paid ads is you can turn it off and on. And so you can get it set up pretty quickly and be going pretty quickly. But the downside is you always have to have a budget. So if you want to increase your leads or sales, you have to spend more money. Or given like the recession we're going into right now, some businesses, if they need to tighten their wallet, well, then they're going to cut off their lifeline too. So you're like always tied to something. And the same thing goes to Facebook ads. Like, you're always going to rely on Facebook and feed them money and build their reputation. Well, why don't you take that time and money, if the circumstances make sense, and put it into SEO? Because with SEO, you build your reputation around your site. You own that site. That's your asset. That's never going away. And as you continue to increase the exposure, it doesn't turn off and on. So right now, if you're in a recession, so what? Your traffic's still the same, more or less. So, I mean, it's an asset that you can leverage a lot better long-term if you have the patience to get there. And so maybe that kind of leads us into what is SEO and how do you do it? So maybe I take a time out there after I just rambled all that. And do you got any follow-ups on that, or should I just go into the basics of SEO?
Oh yeah, no, for sure. Definitely go into basics of SEO. Yeah. I like where this is going.
The way that I kind of categorize it is SEO can get pretty technical, but it doesn't need to be. So if you look at it from a simplistic view, it's kind of two categories. So category A is what's called on-page SEO. So what do you do on your website? And then category B is off-page SEO. So what's external to your website? So the majority of your gains where you get larger exposure on search engines is in that second category. But the kind of the metaphor that I use is you compare it to building a house. So when you build a house, you first have to do the foundation. It takes a lot of time. You need patience, and that's going to support everything else you do. But once it's done, like, the foundation is, nobody cares about it. Nobody looks at it. It's out of sight, out of mind. And everyone else looks at the walls and the nice paint and the pretty furniture and things like that. And so it's kind of like that with SEO, because with SEO, you need to do that first category, which is make sure your website loads quickly, make sure it's mobile friendly, make sure Google can understand your call to action and what you're pointing to and what you got going on. And so once you establish that solid foundation, then you go do the other stuff. That other stuff is only going to be valuable as your foundation is solid. So that's kind of like the two categories. So maybe if you want some free tools for the listeners, where you can start on that category A, which is mobile friendliness, page speed. There's a free tool by Google called Page Speed Insights. There's another one called GT Metrics by a different company. It's just GT, the letters metrix.com. If you are kind of more of a novice, the Google Page Speed is probably better for you because it's more simplistic. But if you have some knowledge, that's actually a disadvantage because it's super high level and doesn't give you specifics. So the opposite about GT Metrics, I love GT Metrics because it's super specific, but it's technical. So some of it might not make a lot of sense. So you can use that and kind of figure out what's going on with your page speed. Google also has like a mobile friendly test. If you just search Google mobile friendly test, you'll find it. But kind of the same thing. The mobile friendly test just kind of speaks in broad terms. There's another website. It's this long URL, so I don't have like a short URL for you, but if you Google Responsivator, and I think it's like John Polachek Responsivator, this guy has this tool that's out there, and what it does is it's more visual, so it's kind of cool because the Google mobile test will just say, hey, you got these problems. So it doesn't visualize it for you. And this responsivator is like the opposite. It doesn't tell you the technical problems, but it's just like, look, here's what your website looks like on different screens and resolutions and devices. So you can like literally see, is something squished on a small screen or is it too stretched out on a large screen? So, start there, fix those kind of things, make sure it's mobile friendly, make sure it's quick. And Google basically says, like, right, Alex, if I go to your website, if you go to a website and it's slow, you don't like it and you tend to leave. So we are basically Alex, we are the average customer. So we too like a quick loading website, because if you think about it, all you're trying to do is make Google look good. Because if Google loads a website in a search result and sends somebody to it and the website sucks, then that person's going to say, oh, well, Google sucks. So the more you can make Google look good, the more they're kind of going to return that favor and have you show up higher. So that's the category A. Then category B, we can go down a million paths. So I'll just give you the crash course and you can tell me where you want to go from there. Category B, the off-page SEO, is basically a popularity contest. So are other websites talking about you? Are they linking to you? Or they don't even have, a lot of people talk about backlinks, which is when one website links to yours. But there's also another concept called citations, which is basically just another website mentioning you, even though they don't have an actual hyperlink. So citations are starting to matter. So Google's looking at, where's the buzz? Who's talking about who? Because that implies there's some action going on. So the more the other websites reference you and in relevancy. So what I mean is, websites that are in your similar industry, it's better to have 10 links or references from other websites that are in a comparable industry than 100 from some low quality website that's just garbage. So when you start to get those, votes in the popularity contest from other external websites, then that's really what accelerates your credibility, which boosts where you show up on search engines. And, how you do that goes down those million paths. So I'll leave it right there for now.
Right on. And I definitely want to speak to that about the backlinks and the citations, because I actually had another gentleman on my podcast not too long ago, Brandon Amoroso, Electric Marketing. Uh-huh. He's in Los Angeles. And we had a good chat about that, because I said, I'm still been trying to figure out, I have a very bare bones understanding of the SEO for my blog. And I have made some changes, like you said, on the website for the type A, making it more mobile friendly, page speed, doing all that stuff, laying the foundation. And then now the other thing I'm focusing on now is using my podcast, because it's such a great medium to interact with people. And over time, you develop those relationships. Like, you will most likely, or maybe, get some mentions about your blog or your podcast on their website. So
right,
it's a great way to get those references or increase your exposure, right, and build your brand in a way.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of things you can do specific to podcasts, like if you're in the podcast space and you want to leverage SEO, and then maybe we can come full circle and talk about more general concepts. But like if you're if you have a podcast, some of the ways you can optimize your site is in that category A, the on page, is increase your relevancy in your content. And so a super easy way to do that is to just transcribe your episodes. And so you can use a tool like descript.com is the one that I use, and there's other transcription tools. But what Descript does is you just load your audio file, give it 60 seconds, depending on how long the file is, and it's going to convert all those audio waves to text. And so then below your podcast episode on your website, you just have a little show notes section, and then you just paste that big chunk of text, because Google, for the most part, it can only rank what it can read. And so images and video, like it understands some of that, but it's not as clear as text. I mean, text is text, so it can read everything. So you can transcribe your files, and that's super easy. It only takes an extra couple minutes and has massive potential value for, SEO value for a podcast. And then, like you said, getting people to mention you or link to you as you go do podcasts, that's definitely more likely that you have somebody put your information in their show notes and link to you. I have a podcast and we put links to our guests in the show notes. So that's an easy way. And that's also nice because, usually on your episode, it's going to talk about you. And so it's going to add the relevancy, and it's going to say Damon does SEO and here's all these things that he's doing, and it's marketing, marketing, marketing. And if I'm trying to optimize my brand for marketing, then it's perfect because the context of that page talks about marketing and links to me. So yeah, there's pretty clear paths for, just specific to the podcast world.
No, for sure. And as far as like having a podcast is concerned for marketing purposes, do you recommend someone have a podcast with their own website dedicated to that podcast, or can it be like, can you have like the podcast itself embedded as on the blog?
Well, you kind of do both because
Yeah.
you have to balance the reality of convenience with SEO. So if you're going to load your own audio file, that's going to suck. And then, it's not going to be as universally device friendly. So you might load a whatever MP whatever file, and it's specific to, I'm trying to think of what the Mac specific file names are, but you might record it on your Mac and you load that, and then that doesn't necessarily play universally. It's not an MP3 or an MP4 file that plays universally.
Right.
So you can run into limitations there. Yes, it's nice that the file's directly on your site and it's your asset, but then you limit your shareability and your listenability. And so I think in that specific example, there's probably more negative opportunities than positive. So to find the best balance, what you do is, use those other tools. Like I use Libsyn. And so Libsyn makes it easy because then I load the file, I load it on my website, it gets distributed to Spotify and Apple and wherever else. And so I have this broad listener base, which is more important because that's actually what I'm trying to accomplish. So it's kind of counterproductive to say, well, I'm going to load my own file to get more audience, and then I'm going to restrict my audience by trying to get a bigger audience. So, use those tools for convenience and reach, but what you do is do the show notes below it and whatever you can to actually have that asset on your website.
Right. And for the how can someone build a content marketing strategy that attracts intentful buyers instead of throwing mud at the wall?
So this one's actually one of my favorite topics to talk about because I think it's such a huge gap in marketing strategies or, solopreneurs, because a lot of times you understand that the concept of content is important, but what do you do from there, right? What do you write about? How often do you write about? How long do you write about it? So there's actually some really easy ways that you can kind of get a head start on this. One of the most important things that you mentioned is the word intent, because a problem with a lot of SEOs or people trying to attempt SEO on their own is because they know content is important, they just write content. And so they just mass produce. And so it's either low quality or it doesn't match the intent of your audience, because the idea is you write content that's going to attract people, that's going to buy your thing. You don't want to just write stuff to bring in people just to read your content and leave. So a good place to start is there's a free website called answerthepublic.com, and you can go in there and whatever your target keyword is, type it in. And what it's going to do is it's going to pull a bunch of data. One example is, how Alex, like if you go to Google and you start typing in, where are blue widgets made, and then it starts to auto complete it and say, so like Answer the Public will go pull data from that. And what that data is saying is, hey, historically speaking, Alex, you're not the first person that started to type this query out, and there's lots of other people that have done it too. And usually they end up typing out this much more. And so maybe you want that thing too. And so that's definitive examples of your potential audience and what they're searching for. So Answer the Public pulls in things like that and goes, okay, well, Alex asked me about shoes. And so now we're going to tell him the who, what, when, where, and why of, how are shoes made? What type of rubber is made in shoes? Why do shoes stink? Like just whatever people are asking about. And that is your customer. So, if you're the shoe guy, then you look at those results and say, okay, well, this is what my audience is already asking. So I'm going to become the authority and the answer for that thing that I know can already attract them. And then you identify the topics that match your industry and would likely be something that, signals intent behind your ideal audience, and then start producing content based on that.
Right. Because I definitely have been experimenting with the Google keywords method. And then, I've heard of Answer the Public as well. Now, let's say you're having on a guest on your podcast, right? Let's say next week, and you're starting to do keyword research that will try and match what you're going to be talking about in the upcoming podcast. Could you use that also to help generate some good questions for the podcast, but that also relate to your potential audience or client that you're trying to attract?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on if you are the podcast host and you have some overlapping topics or business that align with who your guest is. Because if I come in, you obviously have a podcast, and if I come in and I'm about SEO and the core of your podcast is pretty broad and not specific to SEO, and outside of your podcast you don't do anything with SEO, then it doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense for you to consider monetizing our specific topics that we talk about. So it kind of depends on who your guest is, but if there is that potential to monetize the guest's conversation, then yeah, Answer the Public would probably be the first place I would go, because those are the questions that other people are asking, and other people are your audience. So yeah, you could definitely find some topics to cover.
Gotcha. And why do you think now more than ever that brand awareness is crucial these days?
Especially with what's going on with, the coronavirus and all those things. So largely people in general, people like to buy, but they don't like to be sold. And so they like to buy from places they trust, but more so people they trust. So they may pay a business, they may pay you and your business, but they're buying from you, not the faceless company. And so that's kind of always existed. But now with the whole virus thing going on, more people they need attention, they need distraction, they need to focus on something, and they're stuck at home. And so they have the time to do it and be distracted or, fill their attention. And so you have your audience now more than ever. And because they have the time and because of the sensitivity of what's going on with the virus, people are a little hesitant about either spending money or, stretching their dollar further. And so that trust is a huge factor. And, if you can get online and showcase your area of expertise, and I give you a couple examples here in a minute, but like if you can just get on and kind of give value without expecting anything in return, then that's actually what ends up bringing the return, because you get on there and you either share a blog post or you do a podcast or you record a video, and all you do is, in my example, I do videos all the time where I'm like, here's how you do this thing in SEO. And I just give away all the answers, because either the person that listens is going to take my advice and run, which is great because then I just help somebody, or they're going to take my advice and say, hey, I don't need this, but I know somebody that does, and then refers them so I can get some business. Or maybe they do become a customer. So you really don't have any downside to just kind of giving away your expertise without expecting anything in return. And then because of the sensitivity of the economics, what's going on in the world right now, it makes you the better person. So, when that person comes along that does need to buy, then it just brings down those sales walls because they've already been exposed to you. They already have some trust with you. And then they just basically come to you and say, hey, I'm ready.
Yeah. And I really that's one of the biggest things I like about building, something online, is you can slowly build that relationship over a long period of time. Because some people have, they've built their online audience or company, and they've had people come up to them like later down the road, like sometimes years down the road, and say, hey, yeah, I've been watching your videos for years, and I've it's transformed my life. I've gotten the career of my dreams, or the business of my dreams, or met the girlfriend or wife of my dreams. And those are the kind of people that I want to impact, right? Is like providing them with this content and this value. And then over time, all of a sudden you have one or two people down the road that come back to you and they're like, hey, like you provided a lot of value and I learned a lot from you. And that's so empowering.
Yeah. I mean, I can actually give some clear examples, monetary examples, but then I can also give like real, like you started to touch on, real personal rewarding examples. In my company's infancy, so we've been around for 13 years, probably like years 3 through 6, something like that. I had one guy who's actually a real good friend of mine now named Joe. And so he was one of my first clients, and we had a really successful campaign. He made a bunch of money, ended up flipping the business, and then he went on to build and sell 5 businesses in 10 years. And over that time, 3 of those 5 businesses, he needed SEO. And so he comes to me every time. But more importantly to the topic on top of that, during those years, 3 through 5 or 6, that one guy probably sent me 25% of the entirety of my business. And that was just from one
Wow.
relationship. And then, I got a new client that I picked up in January, so just a couple months ago, and he's now brought on 4 accounts just in like 3 months. And that's how I got in with working at the team store with the Utah Jazz. That came from a referral who within 1 week within 2 weeks sent another referral. And within 1 week, that guy sent the Utah Jazz's referral. So, I mean, there's really clear financial benefits to, like, it sounds the opposite. You help without expecting anything in return, but that's how you get the return. And, and then I have all these other funny stories. Like, I was asked to be a godfather to somebody that I've never met in person just because I've given them like so much value. And then one of my team members, like if we were on video right now, I'd show you, but one of my team members was getting married in the Philippines, and this was like 2-3 years ago, and my wife was pregnant with our daughter, and so their wedding was within the week that she was due, and so I didn't want to take the risk of flying out of town, and so I couldn't make it. But I made such an impact on this person that they went and had a life-size cardboard cutout made of me, and I have a cardboard cutout I have pictures of me in their wedding as a cardboard cutout. And so like, it's so funny to talk about, but like, if you really think about the context behind it, like that's really powerful for somebody to be, willing to go that far to just kind of say thanks.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty incredible to have a cardboard cutout. That's the first time I've heard that.
Yeah, it's funny. When I said I'd show you if we were on video, I have one in my office closet because I bought it and to mail to them, and then like the guy sent it to me late and wasn't going to make there, so they ended up finding somebody luckily in the Philippines that could do one too. So now we have these running jokes of the Damons because he's got one and then I've got one, and so we send pictures back and forth of like the Damons like holding guitars and gardening out in the yard and doing things like that.
That's really good. That's a great way to brand yourself too, right? Get that referral and then you're all over the place.
Yeah, it's funny.
That's awesome. Right on. And I noticed another awesome question that I found that I was going to ask you was, how did you outrank the $1 billion ABC network on their show, The Bachelor, for their own contestants' search results?
That was kind of funny. So that was kind of before I really committed to SEO. At the time I was doing design, and I had started my company, but I think I was only like a year into it. And when I started my company, I was like 24, 25. And so it was just cool to be self-employed. And I just kind of did my own thing as a solopreneur. And so my wife was watching The Bachelor, and so she'd kind of ring me in on the season finales and things like that and say, come watch it with me. And so I was familiar enough with how the seasons usually ended that they didn't tend to say who the next Bachelor was until the season premiere, the next round. And this one time they said, hey, the season's over. Yay. Here's what happened. And then stay tuned for our next guy, Andy Baldwin. And I was like, well, that's weird. I don't think they've done that. At least I don't remember them announcing who the next guy was. And so I said, hey, I'm going to run in the other room and get on the computer. And so this was like before I had a laptop. And so I had to go in the other room, and I searched up Andy Baldwin, and there was like nothing there. He was this triathlon guy who was a Navy officer, and he like had his own site, but it was pretty thin on content. I couldn't find anything else really on him. And so I thought, this guy's about to be The Bachelor, and I don't even really pay attention to The Bachelor, and I'm already looking him up. So a million other people got to be. And so that night I told my wife, I was like, babe, I'm just going to be in here for like an hour or two. And so I just cranked out a website in 2 or 3 hours and cataloged anything I could find, any pictures I could find, any info I could find, and made andybaldwin.net. And within like a day or two, it was a cash cow because I just put AdSense on it, and it was the number one site for Andy Baldwin, and I didn't hide that. Right on the thing it says not an official website, and just optimized it the best I could at that point. And that was kind of really. I got some other projects I did where I had similar success, but after repeating that 3 or 4 times was when. A design client came to me and said, what do you know about Google? And I said, well, I know enough that I'll experiment on you. If you experiment on me, I won't charge you anything, but so I'm incentivized if I hit these goals, then you owe me retroactively. And so having experiencing success in SEO with like those little side projects is kind of what birthed it later when I had a client ask me about it. And I was like, yeah, let's do it. And then we hit those benchmarks super quick. And then And then I took that same concept to a second client. I said, hey, no risk. I'm not going to charge anything. Let's see what happens. And repeated the success. And so the combination of my experiments and then with client experiments, I very definitively after that second client said, all right, this is my thing, and just started to shift the whole model towards it.
Wow. And I really like how you did kind of mini experiments with your clients while you were working. And then it kind of built, it evolved, your business evolved on its own that way. That's really cool.
Yeah. It's been fun.
Yeah. And how did you add 150K in sales in a year to your business just by sharing advice on social media? And can anyone else do this?
Yeah, it's the kind of the topic we touched on just a moment ago about social proof, where you just give away free value. So, it's pretty funny for owning a marketing company. We've never really done any marketing of our own. I've never paid for paid ads. And, and it's not just like a one-man thing. It's not me. It's, I have 12 employees, and we've sold millions and millions of dollars in SEO services. And it's largely just that reputation of referrals. But last year, probably in the last 18 months, I started to make an effort to dabble more on social media. And I'm a pretty private person. So even on my Facebook, I talk a lot about my wife and kid. I don't share pictures of them. And so at one point I said, well, why don't I have kind of a more intentional effort behind this? Because, I'm sensitive of my privacy. And so I'm not really opening up opportunities that way. So why don't I take a different angle, and why don't I go all in on the business side and, still share that vulnerable stuff and talk about my appreciation for family, but keep it private, but be more active and, put my, build up some visibility based around my area of expertise. And so I started doing the content thing way more with more intention, because I would do posts here and there about here's how this SEO thing was, but it was mostly more like highlight stuff, like just had a client accomplish this, or I'm excited to work with this new person. And I wasn't coming at it like, hey, reader, I want to help you. It was just like, here's what's going on. And so I kind of shifted my approach to be like, okay, as I post content, let's try and make most of that content so it can help somebody. And so that's when I really started to do content about here's how you do this on SEO, and give like a total roadmap, or here's examples of how you do this thing, and give clear steps. And the more I did that, then I started to get more, engagement and responses and referrals. And so after kind of loosely experimenting with that for 2 or 3 months, I'm very process driven. So I said, let's see if we can make a process out of this. So I came up with kind of like a schedule, and I wrote out a content calendar of things I would touch on. So that way I could be really proactive about producing the content. And I just started sharing a lot of advice, and my primary platform is LinkedIn. And so I'd get on there and do videos and say, here's how you do this thing in SEO. And I would just give away all the answers, like totally the opposite of what most people would think, and say, well, they're just going to take your advice and run and not hire you. But what happens is like we said, you build that trust. And then, for me, I want the people that don't have the time. So I want them to go, yeah, that's my problem, Damon. But I don't want to take your advice and run. I just now trust you. And so then they engage with me. And so in that first year, it brought that 150 grand in business. And it was just entirely the same concept we talk about giving without expecting anything in return. And that's brought some of those referrals I talked about earlier, that client that's brought 4 or 5 new accounts in the last 3 months. And that Inc. 5000 client came from my engagement on LinkedIn. And so I did a webinar about a month ago on this concept with more clear examples, and, maybe to generalize this for your audience, because a lot of feedback when I talk about this concept is, well, your thing is different, Damon, and that doesn't work for me. But it's not different, because you just got to think outside the box. So the examples that I gave in this webinar were, maybe you're a lot of the fight back, the resistance I get on this concept is for offline businesses, right? Because sure, Damon, that sounds great for online businesses, but what about blue collar? So the example I gave is maybe you're a plumber. So you get online and do videos about how to fix that little thing on the toilet. And sure, maybe that takes away a little $80 job from you, but now they trust you, and now you're always top of mind. And that's the key, is top of mind. So then when they have like the $1,000 bigger plumbing problem, or the several $1,000 water heater problem, then they trust you. And so that's when they come in. So you're not losing sales, you're just kind of deferring it for bigger opportunities. Or, maybe you're in a restaurant business. And so you walk in, you do a video about you opening up the shop in the morning and talking about how you love coming in and seeing the freshly cleaned kitchen from the night before. And then you whip up your first dish for the morning and you showcase like your passion for things, and then you stay top of mind. So really, if you take a second to step back and get out of your kind of imposter syndrome and, I'm not good enough or my industry isn't cool enough, you should be able to find something where you can come in and show your expertise or your passion. And then the key is to do that consistently, because that's going to drive that top of mind, which then brings in those sales when those people are ready.
Gotcha. Yeah. And I like how you touched on the consistency factor of providing value through your content. And you mentioned LinkedIn was your main platform for providing that content to your audience. What kind of content strategy did you have when you were starting to really get into it? Would you post once a day or twice a day, or how often would you
I did
post?
I did once a day, Monday through Thursday. I found the engagement was pretty low on Fridays, understandably, and LinkedIn is obviously more business centric, and so people kind of check out on Fridays and definitely Saturdays and Sundays. So I would save my content for the weekdays so I'd get better engagement. And, that's what worked for me based on my industry. And so the opposite may be true for somebody else. Like with the restaurant example, I'd say Instagram is probably better because, you show your colorful food and dishes and shiny kitchen and all that stuff. It's much more visually stimulating. So I would say it's way better to find, experiment on each platform, identify which one has your audience, and gets better engagement, and then go all in on that one before you spread yourself thin on other ones. I am consistent on LinkedIn. I'm now kind of moderately consistent on Facebook, and like Instagram's going to be last for me. Like I'm just barely starting to dabble in it just because my audience isn't there. And so, you got to figure out where your audience is and where you get the engagement, because it's just like the whole search engine thing, right? You don't want to, it's the intent. You don't want to show up higher on Google for words nobody cares about that isn't going to buy your thing. And so it's the same thing. You don't want to go to social media platforms where your audience is not at and the people don't care about your content. So it's going to vary.
Right. No, that's really good. And let's see, I also have here.
Where are you at, Alex? Sounds like you're at a restaurant.
Me? Oh, no. He's probably just here in my kitchen. Yeah. I'm actually just at home right now. Yeah. What else do I have here? Oh, yeah. Do you see a transition to the workforce, more transitioning from working from home after this pandemic is over?
Yeah, I think that's inevitable. And I don't think that, it's not the entirety of the workforce. Obviously, there's some things where you'll always need a workspace. And I think a lot of businesses, even though they're forced to go virtual right now, are still stuck in old school mode. And so when this goes away, they're going to revert back, even though they shouldn't. But yeah, I mean, there's huge opportunity. My company has largely always been remote. A couple of years ago, I bought a building locally. Most of our clients are out of state from where we're at, but I said, hey, let's see if this attracts any local audience. And, it brought some business enough to pay for the building, but it wasn't enough to excite me to go there. And so, I run this big company from home and all my team works from home. And like, there's no reason for many industries, there's absolutely no reason to have a physical office space. And I think a lot of the hesitation with some businesses is, well, Damon, I need to look fancy and I need to, I don't want people to know that I'm at home and things like that. And my argument to that would be, with the exception of some industries that, yes, obviously if you're a doctor, you need to go work at a clean medical facility.
Yeah.
But, my approach has always just been to be transparent. So when I have new clients, if your kids are screaming in the background, it's only awkward if they didn't expect kids screaming in the background. So a lot of times I will proactively tell new clients like, hey, I appreciate your time. And I'll make a joke about it. And I'll say, in case you hear a zoo come running down behind me, it's because my kids just got off school 10 minutes ago. So they'll probably be home pretty soon. And then if anything, beyond them just going, okay, now I'm aware of that, then you become more relatable because they're like, oh, cool, I'm a parent too, or I'm a whatever too, or your dog's barking. You're like, okay, I got pets too. So
Yeah.
I think that the coronavirus actually has opened up the opportunity for people. I think that's expedited that, right? Like if you just own it, then definitely now people are like, well, yeah, of course you're stuck at home. So I would take it as an opportunity. And if your industry allows you to be at home or you're going to continue to be at home, then just keep in mind to just own it and be like, yeah, I'm at home whenever you talk to your clients.
Yeah. And honestly, like I feel that the opportunities that I have had to work at home, because it's slowly getting more and more and more. And I was laid off from my sales job, March 19th. And I've been podcasting ever since I've been off, pretty much trying to get interviews and stuff with guests because I just love working from home and I feel I'm way more productive. Yeah. For years it was, I liked the office and stuff and I got used to that. And then over time I'm like, well, I don't notice any decline or difference in my productivity, whether I'm at home or in an office environment. Yeah. In fact, now I'm more distracted in an office environment because everyone's got their own routine at the office. Some people, they're up every 5 minutes to smoke, or they're up every 15 minutes to go for a coffee. Yeah. So it's like no one really works the full day unless you're someone that's like super in the zone and passionate. Then that's why I find I'm way more in the zone at home because I lock myself in my office, even though you can probably hear a little bit in the background, and I just get way more done in here. Yeah, I got my whiteboard, I just write everything down and then just go to town.
Yeah, it's going to depend on the personality. For me, it was never a hard transition to be at home, and I've been doing it now for so long that I don't know the difference. But, I understand when other people say this is kind of hard being at home. And so what you got to do is you got to figure out what your rhythm is. And that's going to be totally different. For me, I picked I'm fortunate enough to have a home where I have like a dedicated office space. And so I chose the room in our house. It was like the furthest away from the action. So, I still hear my kids every day, jumping up and down and this and that, but I hear it the least here. And so what's important is if you can pick a dedicated space, because what happens is like this gets into like all the psychological stuff is that your mind really gets into a routine. And so if you're trying to do if your like quote unquote office is a desk that's 3 feet from your bed, well, your mind is going, I'm in my bedroom and the bed's right there. And so you don't even know it, but your mind's kind of going like relax mode, sleep mode, non-productive mode. And then to the opposite of that, like if you avoid those productivity negatives, then you also have productivity positives where if you do have a dedicated space and you walk in and your mind goes, oh, this is the productive zone. And so it just starts psychologically ramping up with the concept of productivity. So I think the most important thing is just a dedicated space. And even for how long I've been at it, I think it's kind of funny because the first few years it was like I could be that guy that zoned out and my wife could be watching loud TV and whatever, and I could still stay focused. But the last 2 years or so, it's so rough. If I try and go upstairs and work for whatever reason, I just can't do it lately. Like I gotta have my space.
Yeah. Yeah, because you got to be in that zen zone, right?
Yeah.
Right on. And my last question for you before we leave today is, what is some additional tools brands will need to be successful in 2020 and beyond as far as building their brand and their following or audience online? You already touched on some brief topics there with the answerthepublic.com, and there's that other site there. Hold on, let me find it here.
GT Metrics.
Yeah, Descript.com. Yeah, GT Metrics. Yeah.
Some kind of easy ones are also free. Is a lot of people might be familiar with Google's Keyword Planner. So when you're kind of looking into where you want to dive in your industry, you can go there and set up a free account. It's probably going to ask you to put a card on file, but you don't actually have to bill anything. But you can go there and you can type in, running with the shoes example again, you could type in shoes and it's going to come back and say boots, Converse, whatever, Steve Madden, and it's going to tell you what other people are searching. And so you can kind of say, okay, what are other potential concepts? Type in something to start with, and then look at what Google gives you back and say, okay, what are the different paths I can go down? But another one that you can look at is often I'll say follow the money. And what I mean by that is like if your competitors are throwing money at either paid ads or time at SEO, then it's probably because it's driving a return for them. So you can go, there's a site called spyfu.com. That's spyfu.com. And in that site, you can type in any domain and it's going to show you any data that they've been able to collect, whether it's an estimate on their monthly traffic, but more importantly, it'll also say an estimate on what keywords they're targeting organically with SEO, or if they spend enough on their ad budget, what keywords they're paying for ads on. And so you can kind of look at that and go, well, geez, if they're throwing money at those, then they're probably profitable for them. So if those words are related to my industry too, or directly to my product, then there's a good chance I should consider those to potentially be profitable for me too. So you can kind of use it as competitive analysis to kind of reverse engineer, your decisions on what you're going to go after.
Right on, right on. Well, appreciate you joining us today, Damon. Got some awesome golden nuggets from you today. Awesome value. And to end the podcast episode today, where can we find you and what platforms are you the most active on? And are we able to buy your book yet?
Yeah, I appreciate the time, Alex. So a couple places. LinkedIn is my platform of choice. That's where I give away most of the value. I'm pretty active on Facebook as well. I give away a lot of value there too. So whatever, between those two, that's where you're going to probably find the more authentic version of me, where I'm actually posting. And then as far as how to get a hold of me, SEOnational.com is my business. The website sucks. It's horrible. So, we're busy working on our clients, but if you want to catch the book or, see if SEO is your thing or just understand it better, depending on when this episode drops, I'm going to do freeseobook.com. And I'm going to have some copies on there where you can just go put in your email and it'll send you a PDF copy.
Awesome. Right on. Thanks for joining us today, Damon, and look forward to having you on for a future
Yeah, thanks
episode.
So much, Alex.
I hope you all enjoyed this special guest series episode brought to you by RadioGuestList.com. Again, this is your host, Alex Muir. And if you'd like to learn more about kind of what I do and this podcast, MindCep Podcast, you can check me out on my social media. I always post all my links of my social media in every episode that I post. And I share all my posts, my podcast posts on my LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram. So you'll be able to check out the podcast links on there. So if you want to connect with me, get to know me, I will be answering messages on there. If you have any questions. And again, if you want to hear more episodes like these, or if you have any feedback, please let me know on social media. You can send me a message, or you can feel free to follow my podcast, and be sure to keep checking in and see what I'm up to. I really appreciate everyone that listens to my podcast, and hope you guys all enjoyed, and see y'all next time. Take care.